Aloha. I'm going to talk about Rosacea Research in perspective of idiopathic diseases and also with respect to funding. Because most Rosaceans have no idea what Rosacea Research is going on. In order to really understand and put rosacea in perspective to other idiopathic diseases and the total disease on the planet, we need to understand numbers, okay? According to the World Health Organization, quote, there are still no effective treatments available for around 3/4 of the 30,000 diseases known today worldwide. Okay, so that's one source, the World Health Organization. Another source says 2/3 of all known sicknesses, about 20,000, there is so far no way of treating the cause. And that was an old statistic, but it puts it into perspective. Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of all the diseases, they don't know what causes it, and so there's no effective treatment. So since the cause of rosacea is not known, it's listed as an idiopathic disease. And what that means is they don't know the cause. And so the only thing what they can do is treat the symptoms. And that's what Rosacea Research is pretty much focused on. But there are some theories on the cause of rosacea, but we're not going to get into that right now. We want to understand rosacea in comparison to other idiopathic diseases. So, with Rosacea Research, there was a doctor back in 2003 who really looked into this about Rosacea Research, and he said only one paper was published for every 144,000 rosacea patients in the United States. Compare that to a 1:11 ratio for melanoma, which is another skin disease. Or how about this ratio? 1:4,900 sufferers of psoriasis. Okay, now that gives us an understanding. There's a lot more research being done on melanoma and psoriasis because those diseases have a more devastating impact on sufferers. I mean, if you had to choose between rosacea, melanoma, and psoriasis, which one would you choose? Okay, I'm going to stay with rosacea. And that's one of the problems with Rosacea Research is that there's this view, particularly like with regard to insurance companies and things like that, that rosacea is a cosmetic problem. It's not a real serious disease. But of course, if you have rosacea, you know how horrible rosacea is and how you suffer. And we want more research. So how can we get more research? Well, first off, you need to understand what research is being conducted. With the increase of money spent by rosacea sufferers, there are now more products for rosacea. Therefore, the ones that are selling these rosacea products, whether it's a topical or a pill, this is all called the skin industry. Okay, the skin industry is engaging and sponsoring more rosacea research, and that's good. I mean, we appreciate any papers that do research on rosacea. That's good. Okay, but is there any independent research that's not affiliated or sponsored by the skin industry? Okay, altogether there's 3 nonprofits for rosacea, and all 3 have engaged in some research or sponsoring education grants that are independent, supposedly, of the skin industry. However, when you look at two of these nonprofits, the National Rosacea Society and the American Acne Rosacea Society, AARS. You'll look that where do they get most of their money? Most of their money comes from pharmaceutical companies, which are part of the skin industry. Okay? And these two nonprofits have engaged in quite a bit of the research. Okay? And of course, the skin industry sponsors academia to do rosacea research. But without a doubt, the vast majority of rosacea research is sponsored by the skin industry. Now you can figure out when you read a paper on rosacea, down at the bottom you can look and it'll say funding sources, or it'll say conflicts of interest with the authors of the paper. And they'll say, oh yeah, these guys work for Galderma or some pharmaceutical company. And they acknowledge it. Because why? Why would they do that? To understand that, there was a Dr. Kligman. He's since passed away, Albert Kligman. He was an MD and a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay? And he wrote back in 2003, The Indifference of the National Institutes of Health, with an annual budget of nearly $30 billion, has not seen fit to fund a single grant for the investigation of rosacea. And that was in 2003, and it's been the same. You can look at the NIH and what they're sponsoring, and every year it's like $30 billion. Last year it was $33 billion. Not one paper on rosacea. Why? Because most of the insurance companies and the NIH, they think rosacea is a cosmetic problem. So they're not going to sponsor that. Okay? So, Dr. Kligman continued in this paper to say, quote, that most research done on rosacea is by the skin industry, which is voluminous literature, mainly focused on treatments sponsored by commercial interests. And this is what he says, quote, perhaps not the most credible source of unbiased research. And you can understand why. If you're selling a rosacea treatment and you're sponsoring research, you're going to want that research to show that your treatment is doing good. And you can understand why they would want that and have it published. So then, could Rosaceans sponsor their own research? We had a Dr. Joel Bamford, he was a MD. He wrote an article in the Journal of the Rosacea Research and Development Institute, which we published in 2010. He said his article was, quote, here's the title, is it possible for Rosaceans to do research? Could a group of Rosaceans come together and sponsor their own research? How would they do that? Well, they'd have to donate. Okay, so that's what we're going to need to figure out. Is it possible? Well, we tried to do this with the development of the RRDI in 2004. So far, we've engaged in 3 education grants, but guess where we got that money? From a pharmaceutical company. We got $6,000 and we gave it all out, and it was a pharmaceutical company. It's really hard to get donations from rosacea sufferers. We barely are scraping by. So we need to discuss rosacea research in perspective of funding. So the funding for rosacea research is primarily being done by the skin industry. Now, however, there are 3 nonprofits, as mentioned, and one of the nonprofits is engaged in most of this nonprofit research is the National Rosacea Society, the NRS. And I've been following them for over 21 years. and looking carefully at how they spend their money. And they've received about $15 million over a 21-year period. And how much did they spend on Rosacea Research? $1.5 million. So that's about 10%. So when you donate to the NRS, 10% is put on research, okay? 10 cents out of $1. Where does the rest go? Well, 60%, over 60% goes to 2 private contractors that are owned by one of the board members. Now, the NRS is run by dermatologists and businessmen who have a vested interest in rosacea. It used to be in the past that a nonprofit had to prove that 33% of its donations came from the public. Okay? Well, now, since 2014, the IRS allows nonprofits that report less than 33% of public support to qualify the public support requirement if they check box line 17A, Schedule A, Section C, and make a qualifying statement. And then in 2015, the IRS has allowed certain nonprofit organizations to continue if it can prove 10% of its revenue comes from the general public. Okay? That's how it works. So now it's 10%. So if you look at the National Rosacea Society and the American Acne and Rosacea Society, they are heavily funded by the skin industry because they have to report where does their money come from. And their money's coming from the skin industry. So their research is really biased, as Dr. Kligman points out. And there's not much independent research going on. Now, if you want to change that, all you have is the RRDI, and it's run by rosacea sufferers. We have no vested interest in using the donated money to spend it for ourselves. We're trying to just do research. We're trying to keep one nonprofit completely separate from the skin industry, and it's part of a patient advocacy group of support for those who suffer from rosacea. If you want to keep this going, and if you want to engage in any kind of independent research, we need you to step up to the plate and help, because our days are numbered. If we don't do something pretty soon, the RRDI. So thanks for listening.